أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي رب زدني علما. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we are going to continue with the verse number 77 of Surah An-Nisa, that is the women. And the number of the surah is number 4. And in case you want to know the juz or the part or the sipara, then we are on the 5th sipara. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alam tara ila allazina qila lahum kuffu aydiyakum wa aqimus salata wa atuz zakata falamma kutiba alayhimul qitalu idha fariqun minhum yakhshawna an-nasa ka khashyatillahi aw ashadda khashya. Have you not seen those who were asked to refrain from attacking and to establish prayer and pay the zakat? When they were asked to fight in the cause of God, a group from among them started fearing the people the way they should fear God, or even more. وَقَالُوا رَبَّنَا لِمَا كَتَبْتَ عَلَيْنَا الْقِتَالَ لَوْلَا أَخَّرْتَنَا إِلَى أَجَلٍ قَرِيبٍ قُلْ مَتَاعُ الدُّنْيَا قَلِيلٌ وَالْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لِمَنِ اتَّقَى وَلَا تُظْلَمُونَ فَتِيلًا. They say, O our Lord, why did you make fighting obligatory for us? Why did you not give us some more time? Say, the enjoyment of this world is short-lived, while the hereafter is better for the one who is God-conscious, the one who is a muttaqi. You will not be treated unjustly even as much as the skin of a date stone. Fatila is the skin on the dates, the seed of the date. Have you not seen those? Those here refers to the hypocrites, especially in Medina. The hypocrites were those who pretended to be Muslims. They said, yes, we have come to faith. They did the bear with the Prophet. But in their hearts of heart, they knew that they did not believe in the faith fully. And all the things in which you can pretend or physically show, your faith, they tried to accomplish. For example, they would come to the congregations of the prayer, to the Jamaat, and they would also pay the zakat. But when it came to fighting in the cause of God and being prepared to die in the battlefield, it was not possible for them because of their weak faith. And for a moment, whether he dies or is successful and does not die, in both cases he has a high station because he is doing whatever he is doing from the depth of his heart. According to Abdurrahman bin Auf, he said to the Prophet, as polytheists we were honorable. He said this in Makkah. As polytheists or idol worshippers we were honorable. But as believers we have been dishonored by the kuffar. Give us the permission to fight. So some people, the new Muslims, they were really, itching to fight a fight in the cause of God with full faith against the non-believers, because the non-believers were persecuting them in Makkah. According to some commentators, this also refers to the hypocrites in Medina. So anyway, it refers to hypocrites wherever they may be. Now, at this stage, especially in Makkah, the Muslims or the believers were asked to refrain from fighting because the Prophet ﷺ was asked to refrain from it. The Prophet did not say or do anything on his own. He always waited for a command, for a revelation, for a wahi, and then he would do whatever he had to do. So when the people have weak faith, then they start fearing people. Like fearing people means in the battlefield they were afraid that the enemy would easily kill them. And here it is said, the Prophet is being told to say, Qul, the enjoyment of this world is short-lived. The very word dunya means a place that is very small, unimportant, close by, and short-lived. So dunya as compared to deen or the hereafter is better for the one who is God conscious. So one who is muttaqi, who is God conscious, who loves God, and who also is afraid of annoying God, of displeasing God, then the hereafter is better for that person, because it is also easier for him to acquire grades or stations in the hereafter. There is a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in which he is reported to have said, these are my own words, the Prophet ﷺ compared this life to a nap that a traveler takes beneath a tree and then he moves on. If a person is traveling on foot or on camelback or whatever, and he's tired and it's hot, he takes a little rest under the shade of a tree. And that nap that he takes could be just a few hours, maybe 1 hour or 2 hours or something like that. And then he wakes up and he realizes that he has to carry on, and then he moves on. So this little nap has been compared to the life in this world. This life is very short-lived. And it is also said that one should make as much effort for this life according to the span of this life. And we should make an effort for the other life according to the span of that life. And the span of the hereafter, of the next life, is ever and ever and ever and always. It is eternal. So that in itself should make us realize how much more effort we should be putting into all those things which will gain us a station in the next life. أينما تكونوا يدرككم الموت ولو كنتم في بروج مشيدة وإن تصبهم حسنة يقولوا هذه من عند الله وإن تصبهم سيئة يقولوا هذه من عندك قل كل من عند الله فما لهؤلاء القوم لا يكادون يفقهون حديثا. So no matter where you are, death will overcome you even if you seek security in strong forts. So according to our belief, we all know that the time and place of our death is preordained. And this is the reason why people who have strong faith are not afraid to die. Of course, one should not waste one's life in something foolish and giving up one's life for some foolish cause. But in the cause of God, the believer gets extra strength. He also knows that if he's fighting the cause of God and if he dies, then he will be declared a martyr or a shaheed. And the shaheed has a very high station in the spiritual hierarchy of the believers. So here it is said that even if you go and hide in a strong fort, death cannot be stopped by hiding in a strong fort. Death will find you wherever you are. I don't know if I like to tell some of these very nice Sufi stories. Maybe I did, but maybe all of you didn't hear it. There was this man who was walking around in a bazaar, in a marketplace in Egypt, in Misr. And then suddenly he looked up and he saw the angel of death. I believe one can recognize the angel of death when one sees him. The angel of death was, staring at him. So he got scared and he tried to go to Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam, and he had all these things under his control, the wind and the jinns and all these things. So he said, please make me go to India. I need to go to India right away. So Prophet Sulaiman said, okay. And he landed in a bazaar, in a marketplace in India in no time. And when he reached there and he looked up again, he saw the same angel of death staring at him. So he said, what is the matter with you? You were just staring at me in Misr and now you're staring at me again. What's wrong with you? And the angel said, in Misr, I was staring at you because I had been given the orders to take your soul from a bazaar in India. And there I was wondering how you would manage to come so quickly to the marketplace in India. So this little story illustrates that there is nothing one can do to run away from death. The angel of death knows the time and the place where he has to collect our soul. So here it is said that no matter where you are, death will overcome you even if you seek security in strong forts. So if they encounter, of course, it also does not mean that one should just, be careless about one's life or say, well, if death has to come, it will come. And, challenge death in this way. That's not the right kind of attitude. Everyone has to try and save everyone else's life, whether it's the person who is ill or he's in some dangerous position. We have to do our part, and the final outcome, of course, will be whatever God has willed. So if they encounter something, and also, I keep thinking of other things. Also, there is this, I'm not sure exactly which surah, it's probably Surah Al-Maida, in which it is said that if a person kills one human being, it's like killing all of humanity. And if a person saves one life, it's like saving all of humanity. So that's how important a life is in this world. So if they encounter something good, they say this is from God. And if they encounter something, some adversity, they say to you, this is from you. That is, they say to the Prophet, that you have brought a bad omen. And this is why we are suffering. Say everything is from God. What has happened to this nation that did not come close to understanding anything? So what we have to understand here is that the ultimate real cause or source of all happenings are from God. So what actually they were doing was that when they had a good harvest or they were successful in their trading or whatever, then they would say this is from God. And if there was something, if they suffered something, they had a loss, they incurred a loss, then they would say this is from you. They would blame the Prophet for it. But here it is being said that everything is from God. Of course, it is also true that sometimes whatever wrong we have done, we have to suffer for it. But ultimately, God is the real cause and source of everything. And also it is said that whatever is happening to us is not, even if it seems to be bad, is not necessarily all bad. It might be, we might be able to earn more stations or ranks or higher spiritual stations through that suffering that we have to go through, the trial that we have to go through. Ma asabaka min hasanatin famin Allah, wa ma asabaka min sayyatin famin nafsik, wa arsalnaka linnasi rasula, wa kafa billahi shahida. Whatever good you encounter is from God. And whatever you encounter of evil is the result of your own deeds. For example, the example is given that when people left their positions in the battle of Uhud, while the Prophet is still alive and he's with them in that battle and they disobey his orders, then they had to suffer. Though it was the evil of their own deeds. Of course, they were later forgiven. We have sent you as a messenger to all humanity, and God is sufficient as witness. Humanity, because it says here, وَأَرْسَلْنَاكَ لِلنَّاسِ. Nas means all the human beings. We have sent you as a messenger to all humanity, and God is sufficient as witness. Because why as witness? Because people kept saying, who's the witness to your prophethood? We don't know. How come you declared yourself to be a prophet? So God is saying that God is sufficient as a witness to the prophethood of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Bani Israelis were the ones who kept asking, who is the witness of his prophethood? So we know that all the previous prophets were sent just for their own nations and their own time. But Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the final prophet. That is why he's the universal prophet, and he's sent for the whole of mankind and for all times to come, since no other prophet will follow him. This is also the reason why his book has been perfectly preserved, while no other book has been perfectly preserved. Also, since this sentence says, وَأَرْسَلْنَاكَ لِلنَّاسِ رَسُولًا, we have sent you to the whole, of humanity as a prophet. Therefore, there is no restriction of race, color, or nation, or tribe, because even Prophet Jesus, Hazrat Isa alayhi salam, was also sent to the Bani Israel, and so many other prophets came to the Bani Israel. But Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is not a prophet for the Arabs, nor just for the Muslims. He is for every nation, every tribe, every race, every color. And of course, this point can be proved by the fact that in the whole long history of Islam, there has never been a mosque, a masjid, which was exclusively, say, for if the people living in that country were white, then they would say, okay, this mosque is only for the white people. And at a short distance, another mosque, which was for the colored. So there is no restriction of race, color, tribe, or nation. Therefore, obeying the Prophet is a part of our faith, not just believing in him, but also obeying him. So when we say obeying the Prophet, it means that we have to give importance to the hadith. There are some people, even today, who say that the Quran is enough for us, but we had discussed this earlier, that if you say the Quran is enough for me, then you cannot find all the details of the practice of the faith in the Quran. For example, zakat, all the details, even salat, namaz, prayers, you don't find all the details in the Quran. So the hadith goes hand in hand with the Quran, with the word of God. And even the hadith is not the word of the Prophet, but this is something that he was inspired to say. In fact, in Surah An-Najm, and in verses number 3 and 4, we find, I'll just give the Arabic quotation, وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. That means he does not speak from his own desires or wishes, and all he does is speak from the wahi that is sent to him, from the revelation. Whatever revelation he receives, he speaks according to that. Abdullah bin Ubay was the leader of the munafiqeen, of the hypocrites. He had criticized the Prophet and said that the Quran, and of course most of the people at that time were doing this, that the Quran is the word of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the verse number 84 that we'll come to later was revealed after that. First, let us finish with this verse number 80. وَمَنْ يُطِيعِ الرَّسُولَ فَقَدْ أَطَاعَ اللَّهَ وَمَنْ تَوَلَّى فَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ عَلَيْهِمْ حَفِيظًا. Whoever obeys the messenger, in fact, obeys God. As for those who turn away, we have not sent you as the keeper. So here in the Quran itself, even people who are just believing in the Quran, they are being told that if you obey the messenger, you are actually obeying God. How? Why? Because the Prophet is not saying anything on his own. So if you obey what he's saying, if you pay heed to what he's saying, then you are paying heed to what God has said. وَيَقُولُونَ طَاعَةً فَإِذَا بَرَزُوا مِنْ عِنْدِكَ بَيَّتَ طَائِفَةٌ مِّنْهُمْ غَيْرَ الَّذِي تَقُولُ اللَّهُ يَكْتُبُ مَا يُبَيِّتُونَ فَأَعْرِضْ عَنْهُمْ وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ وَكَفَىٰ بِاللَّهِ وَكِيلًا. They say, we accept. But when they leave your presence, a group from among them debates the whole night in opposition to what you have said. And God notes down whatever they discuss at night. So ignore them and place your trust in God. God is sufficient as the caretaker. This is again about the hypocrites, that they would come into the gatherings of the believers, and they would attend the gatherings of the believers, listen to the Prophet, and then go back among their own people, and at night they would sit and discuss in opposition to what the Prophet had said. They were trying to criticize him. So they spent the whole night in opposition to what the Prophet had said. So now the Prophet is being told to ignore them and place his trust in God, because God is sufficient as the caretaker. أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ وَلَوْ كَانَ مِنْ عِنْدِ غَيْرِ اللَّهِ لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. Do they not meditate about the Quran? Do they not think about it? Do they not, sit and try to understand it? If it was from someone other than God, they would have found a great deal of contradiction in it. The word ikhtilaf can also mean a conflict, contradiction or conflict. So, since there is no conflict or contradiction in the Quran, that is also one of the proofs that it is not a human composition, It's a suprahuman source that has sent down this book. And also in all these 23 years during which time the Quran was revealed, in the society of the time, and the believers faced all kinds of ups and downs, wars and peace, victory and defeat, love and hate. But in spite of all these things, there was no contradiction or conflict in the verses of the Quran. وَإِذَا جَاءَهُمْ أَمْرٌ مِنَ الْأَمْنِ أَوِ الْخَوْفِ أَذَاعُوا بِهِ وَلَوْ رَدُّوهُ إِلَى الرَّسُولِ وَإِلَى أُولِي الْأَمْرِ مِنْهُمْ لَعَلِمَهُ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَنبِطُونَهُ مِنْهُمْ وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ وَرَحْمَتُهُ لَاتَّبَعْتُمُ الشَّيْطَانَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. When they receive news of peace or fear, that is war, they announce it openly. If they had referred it to the messenger or those in authority, those who could find out the truth would have come to know about it. If it was not for the favor and mercy of God, you would have started following Shaitan, except for a few. Now this refers to when people would hear some news about something, such and such tribe is going to attack us or whatever, then they would spread rumors about it. And the rumors are always wrong news. And when wrong news are spread, then of course some harm can come to the people who have believed in the rumor. So it has been said that even the believers were sometimes doing this. So they are being told, they are being warned against spreading rumors without confirming them. And if they do not have a way of confirming them, then they are being told to go to the authority. They could have come to the Prophet or to one of the Sahaba who was in an important position. And also some of the Sahaba were also assigned a duty of espionage that is done by every country in the world. The countries you can read, if you read the papers regularly, you will find that the countries are catching and accusing each other of spying on them, and they're catching the spies. So this makes the country who's doing the spying a little stronger, because then they become aware of what the enemy is trying to do. So if they had heard a rumor and if they had not spread it, but come and talk to somebody in authority, it would have been better. And then the people in authority would have found out the truth about it. فَقَاتِلْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ لَا تُكَلِّفُ إِلَّا نَفْسَكَ وَحَرِّضِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ عَسَى اللَّهُ أَنْ يَكُفَّ بَأْسَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا وَاللَّهُ أَشَدُّ بَأْسًا وَأَشَدُّ تَنْكِيلًا. Fight in the way of God and encourage the believers, for you cannot force anyone except yourself. God may well contain the strength of the unbelievers, and God is great in strength and severe in giving punishment. So here the Prophet ﷺ is being asked to encourage or to inspire the believers to fight and in the cause of God, and also to overcome all fear of death. He is not being asked to force them. He's not being asked to order them. He's just being asked to encourage them. And also he's being told that you cannot force anyone except yourself. So the Prophet did not force anyone to do anything, not even to fight in a jihad in the cause of God, but the Prophet was asked to encourage them or to inspire them or to tell them about all the advantages that one has when one goes to fight in a jihad. There's something I'd like to mention here. The word jihad is not used so frequently or openly in the Quran. The word used for fighting is qatil. فَقَاتِلْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Fight in the way of God. And jihad or jahada is to strive, to make an effort. And therefore, we all have heard this hadith in which the Prophet, when he was coming back from a jihad, when they were coming back from a jihad, he said to his companions, now we have to go from a smaller jihad to a greater jihad. And the people were surprised. What can be a greater jihad than the one we have just fought? So he said that is jihad bin nafs, fighting your inner, temptations, all the other wrong ideas and all the worldly, selfishness that we have in our hearts, Fighting that, controlling our soul and keeping it in the right place is the greater jihad. Now we are on verse number 85. Man yashfa shafa'atan hasanatan yakun lahu nasibun minha. Wa man yashfa shafa'atan sayyatan yakun lahu kiflun minha. Wa kana Allahu ala kulli shay'in muqita. The one who intercedes in a good recommendation will find a reward in it. And the one who intercedes in an evil recommendation will bear the burden of it. For God is the nurturer of everything. So here interceding or shafa, here it means that if you join hands with somebody in doing good, then that person will find his reward with God. And the one who supports somebody in evil deeds will find the burden in the form of punishment in this world as well as the next. Okay, the question is, can I give the reference of the number of the verses which mention jihad? Now this number 84, we just talked about number jihad in 84. This I think is about when the Prophet was given permission to fight. See, in Makkah, they were all told to be patient. The Prophet was asked to be patient and to bear whatever persecution those enemies were piling up on them. But in Medina, they were asked. Now they have their they are strong enough. They have like a government of their own, and the leader is being followed. So they were said, now you can fight a jihad whenever it is necessary. You can also encourage your people to fight, but we will just read a little later what kind of a fight and why must one fight a jihad. We were talking about shafa, like interceding in a good recommendation and interceding or taking part in an evil recommendation. And we said that, if you join somebody who's doing some good work, then you are interceding in a good cause. And the opposite is, of course, obvious. And also helping someone who is in a difficult situation and trying to relieve him of pain and suffering, this will also be rewarded, and this also comes under the intercession of a good recommendation. That means you join the forces of the people, whoever is trying to do something good, or the other way around. وَإِذَا أُوذِيتُمْ بِتَحِيَّةٍ فَحَيُّوا بِأَحْسَنَ مِنْهَا أَوْ رُدُّوهَا إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ حَسِيبًا. And when you are greeted with a good greeting, return a better greeting, or at least one as good. Indeed, God is the reckoner over everything. Now, greeting here is, of course, most commentators think it refers to the salam that the Muslims say to each other. And also it is said to, it's a prayer. Assalamu alaikum, that means, may everything go right with you. Salamti is when everything is just right. And also it includes the meaning of peace. So when somebody says salam, it's a prayer that we keep saying to each other every time we see each other. So when you are greeted with a good greeting, return a better greeting. So what will be a better greeting? If somebody says assalamu alaikum, you say wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Or if somebody says assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, you say wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. That is, may God have peace. So we are wishing each other peace and every kind of well-being. And also if we say rahmatuhu, his mercy, and barakatuh, and his blessings. I knew an American lady who was married to a Pakistani, and she had been taught all these little things, how to say salamu alaikum, wa alaikum salam, and all these things. And one day somebody said to her, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and she was surprised, and she looked at me and she said, what is this? What does this mean? Why such a long reply? So I gave her the meaning of it after his translation. I said, it means, peace be with you and his mercy and his blessings. She was so touched that, she had tears in her eyes when she heard this, and she couldn't believe that every time we meet each other, we are giving each other such good, wishes and prayers. Now, about this verse 86 that we just read, Muhammad Asad says that This is also an offer of, it can also mean an offer of peace by the enemy, either collectively or individually. Like if you are about to, have a battle or something, and the enemy comes up with an offer of peace, either the whole group or maybe individually a person says, I'm on your side, I'm not your enemy anymore. Then you have to return a better greeting. That means you have to accept their offer of peace and stop the enmity. Allahu la ilaha illa huwa la yajma'annakum ila yawm al-qiyamati la rayba fi wa man asdaqu min Allahi haditha. There is no deity except God. He will gather you on the day of resurrection, about which there is no doubt. For who can be more truthful than God in saying things? Since God has said that He will gather you on the day of resurrection, the hashar means, gathering. Then if God has said that, then it is going to happen. For God, whatever God says is the truth. فَمَا لَكُمْ فِي الْمُنَافِقِينَ فِئَتَيْنِ وَاللَّهُ أَرْكَسَهُمْ بِمَا كَسَبُوا أَتُرِيدُونَ أَنْ تَهْدُوا مَنْ أَضَلَّ اللَّهُ وَمَنْ يُضْلِلِ اللَّهُ فَلَنْ تَجِدَ لَهُ سَبِيلًا. So what is the matter with you that you have become divided into two groups regarding the hypocrites? But God has overturned them because of their deeds. Do you want to guide the one who has been allowed by God to go astray? For the one who has been allowed by God to go astray, you will not find the right way. So when people started realizing that in our midst there are some hypocrites, they are pretending to be believers, but they are not really believers. So the believers sort of, argued among themselves, and they sort of became divided into groups. Some said, no, actually they are believers. And some said, no, they are not. So here it is being said, why have you become divided into two groups regarding the hypocrites? And do you want to guide the one who has been allowed by God to go astray? For the one who has been allowed by God to go astray, you will not find the right way. وَدُّوا لَا تَكْفُرُونَ كَمَا كَفَرُوا فَتَكُونُونَ سَوَاءً فَلَا تَتَّخِذُوا مِنْهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءَ حَتَّى يُهَاجِرُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ فَإِنْ تَوَلَّوْا فَخُذُوهُمْ وَاقْتُلُوهُمْ حَيْثُ وَجَدتُّمُوهُمْ وَلَا تَتَّخِذُوا مِنْهُمْ وَلِيًّا وَلَا نَصِيرًا. They will be pleased if you start disbelieving the way they disbelieve, that you will all become the same. Do not befriend them until they migrate in the way of God. So there are some people in Makkah who are also pretending and who are supposed to be like, they are like the hypocrites of Medina. If they turn away, then catch them and slay them wherever you find them, and do not choose from them friends and helpers. Some commentators think that there was a group of 10 renegades, that is the turncoats, or who had, reverted back to their own religion, but they were pretending to be Muslims. Because those who accepted Islam migrated to Medina. But because of the difficulties they faced there, because some of them had left some of their family behind, and of course everyone had left their property behind, and because of social restrictions, now the new rules were coming up about how to behave and what to do and what not to do, and the fear of attacks from the enemy, and also the different social setup, some of these people who had migrated, they would actually, or maybe, yes, some of these who had, supposedly accepted Islam, they would revert to their own religion and go back to Makkah. Now the believers in Makkah were divided in their opinion about them. Some considered them to be believers, but others thought that they were traitors. And Hazrat Ibn Abbas also said that this is about some people in Makkah who accepted Islam before the Hijrah, but continued to support the pagan Quraysh. Maybe because their ties with the Quraysh were so strong. They have, all the close relatives and friends, that they continued to support the pagan Quraysh. So the believers were sort of divided in their opinion about these people. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ يَصِلُونَ إِلَىٰ قَوْمٍ بَيْنَكُمْ وَبَيْنَهُمْ مِيثَاقٌ أَوْ جَاءُوكُمْ حَسِرَتْ صُدُورُهُمْ أَنْ يُقَاتِلُوكُمْ أَوْ يُقَاتِلُوا قَوْمَهُمْ وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَسَلَّطَهُمْ عَلَيْكُمْ فَلَقَاتَلَكُمْ فَإِنِ اعْتَزَلُوكُمْ فَلَمْ يُقَاتِلُوكُمْ وَأَلْقَوْا إِلَيْكُمُ السَّلَامَ فَمَا جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ عَلَيْهِمْ سَبِيلًا. Except for those who join a group with whom you have an agreement, or those who have come to you because they are tired of fighting you, as well as their own people. If God had willed, He would have given them control over you, and then they would have fought you. If they desist and do not fight you and send you a message of peace, then God has given you no reason to persecute them. So you see, fighting in the cause of God is not just, on the whim of the people. There are a lot of restraints and restrictions and rules which have to be followed. So here it is said that if they desist, the enemy who is fighting you and bringing harm to you, if they stop fighting, and if they hear, earlier we had read, if they give you an offer of peace, then you should also stop fighting. You can't say, no, he started the fight, so I'm going to finish him off. This is not one of the rules of the jihad. And the order to kill them is in case they hatch conspiracies against you or fight against you. But if they stop, then you have to stop as well. So the way I understand jihad, it is a defensive war. And in Makkah, when they were being persecuted, they did not even fight a defensive war. They just kept tolerating all their evil designs. سَتَجِدُونَ آخَرِينَ يُرِيدُونَ أَن يَأْمَنُوكُمْ وَيَأْمَنُوا قَوْمَهُمْ كُلَّمَا رُدُّوا إِلَى الْفِتْنَةِ أُرْكِسُوا فِيهَا فَإِن لَّمْ يَعْتَزِلُوكُمْ وَيُلْقُوا إِلَيْكُمُ السَّلَامَ وَيَكُفُّوا أَيْدِيَهُمْ فَخُذُوهُمْ وَاقْتُلُوهُمْ حَيْثُ مَا ثَقِفْتُمُوهُمْ وَأُولَٰئِكُمْ جَعَلْنَا لَكُمْ عَلَيْهِمْ سُلْطَانًا مُبِينًا. You will find some others who wish to remain in peace with you and in peace with their people. But whenever they are called to create disorder, they fall for it at once. So if they do not stay away from you, nor send a message of peace, and do not restrain their hands, then catch them and do away with them wherever you find them. Now here is an order to kill your enemy, but what are the conditions? These are the people against whom we have given you express permission. So these are the people who, whenever they are called to by other tribes or other nations to create disorder, even in the modern world, people are trying to countries are trying to harm other countries, and then they sort of gang up. Some countries get together. So some countries who have a similar purpose and similar thinking, they get together and they try to harm some other country. Sometimes they're even just jealous of that country. So if they are called to create disorder, they fall for it at once. So if they do not stay away from you, nor send a message of peace, and do not restrain their hands, that means they are constantly attacking you, you catch them and do away with them wherever you find them. These are the people against whom we have given you express permission. So you cannot say, I think, the Muslims can't say, oh, this is a small, weak country, let's go and get hold of it and let's do a jihad. So jihad, I feel, is a defensive war. وَمَا كَانَ لِمُؤْمِنٍ أَن يَقْتُلَ مُؤْمِنًا إِلَّا خَطَأً وَمَنْ قَتَلَ مُؤْمِنًا خَطَأً فَتَحْرِيرُ رَقَبَةٍ مُؤْمِنَةٍ وَدِيَةٌ مُسَلَّمَةٌ إِلَى أَهْلِهِ إِلَّا أَن يَصَّدَّقُوا فَإِنْ كَانَ مِنْ قَوْمٍ عَدُوٍّ لَكُمْ وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ تَحْرِيرُ رَقَبَةٍ مُؤْمِنَةٍ وَإِنْ كَانَ مِنْ قَوْمٍ بَيْنَكُمْ وَبَيْنَهُمْ مِيثَاقٌ فَدِيَةٌ مُسَلَّمَةٌ إلى أهله وتحرير رقبة مؤمنة ومن لم يجد فصيام شهرين متتابعين توبة من الله وكان الله عليما حكيما. It is not permissible for a believer to kill another believer except by mistake. Killing anybody, any human being, without cause is like killing the whole of humanity. But killing of a believer by another believer is not permissible at all. It's not halal. It can never be forgiven. It's unforgivable. The one who kills a believer by mistake should free a believing slave and pay blood money, that is indemnity, or money to the heirs, except if they forego it. If the heirs say, no, we don't want this money, then you can forego it. And if the victim was a believer but belonged to a group hostile to you, then a believing slave should be freed. And if the victim belonged to a group with whom you have an agreement, then blood money should be given to the heirs and a believing slave should be freed. So you see, all these rules are there and you just cannot go and fight and kill anyone you want to. So the same rules, if the murdered person is from a group with whom you have a pact, that whether he's a believer or he's a non-believer, then the murderer should free a believing slave and also pay blood money to the heirs. The same rule applies to zimmis. Zimmis are the non-believers who live in a Muslim country. And for the Muslim, kafir, majusi, etc., the blood money is the same. And at that time, the blood money was supposed to be 100 camels. Of course, these rules are they're not being practiced these days. But it's just good to know what was being done at that time. And these are the, rules, the expiation, atonement, if one has killed a believer by mistake. But also if one has killed a non-believer from a tribe with whom you have an agreement, then the same rule applies. So if it is not possible to free a slave, then the accused should fast for 2 months continuously as a means to have his sins forgiven by God. God is the all-knowing, the wise. To fast for 2 months continuously means that if even one fast is missed for whatever reason, then you have to start all over again, which is a very difficult atonement or punishment. وَمَنْ يَقْتُلْ مُؤْمِنًا متعمدا فجزاؤه جهنم خالدا فيها وغضب الله عليه ولعنه وأعد له عذابا عظيما. For the one who kills a believer intentionally, muta'ammidan, that means knowingly, the punishment is hell, a permanent abode, and the wrath of God and removal from His grace, and a great punishment lying in wait. According to Ibn Abbas, one who intentionally kills a believer and also he believes that the murder of a Muslim is permitted, then there is no pardon ever. There is no way that he can atone for it. There is no way that he can pay for it. That there is no pardon ever. But these days we find that there are Muslims who are killing Muslims and they don't even think about these things which we have been told in the Quran. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا ضربتم في سبيل الله فتبينوا ولا تقولوا لمن ألقى إليكم السلام لست مؤمنا تبتغون عرض الحياة الدنيا وعند الله مغانم كثيرة كذلك كنتم من قبل فمن الله عليكم فتبينوا إن الله كان بما تعملون خبيرا. O believers, when you go out in the way of God, first confirm before saying to the one who gives a greeting of peace that he is not a believer. You seek the worldly pleasures, but he has plenty of treasures. You were the same some time back, then God favored you, so be sure to confirm. Indeed, God is aware of all that you do. This verse 94 refers to a certain incident that happened when the Prophet ﷺ sent some people on an expedition, because there were some people who were not really, carrying on a war. They were not attacking them, but they used to do these surreptitious things. They used to come at night and harm the Muslims and then run away. So an expedition was sent, and when those people heard that this expedition was coming, they all ran away, except for one man by the name of Marwas. And he said, Assalamu alaikum. And thinking him to be a non-believer, because he did belong to that tribe, he was killed. And these people, the Muslims who had gone, they brought back all his goats. When the Prophet was told about this, he was very upset because they said that when we approached him, he said, Assalamu alaikum, pretending to be a Muslim. And the Prophet said, how do you know? Maybe he had accepted Islam, and he had actually accepted Islam. So the Prophet was very upset. And this is why this verse was revealed. When you go out in the way of God, first confirm before saying to the one who gives a greeting of peace. That means either he says Assalamu alaikum or he offers peace. That is, he says that I do not want to fight, I'm on your side. Then do not say that you are not a believer. And here it is being said, you seek the worldly pleasures. That means maybe some of these people thought, he has so many goats, we can get hold of them. And God says, you seek the worldly pleasures, but He, that is God, has plenty of treasures. You were the same some time back, like they're being reminded that they were also non-believers at one time. Then God favored you. So be sure to confirm first before you do away with a person whom you think to be a non-believer in a combat. The same thing had happened once in a battle, that when this person came under the sword of the believer and he said, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, and the person who had the sword in his hand was already worked up, and he said, this man is pretending. So he did away with him. And then the Prophet said, you should not have done that. Another point that comes out of this verse is that the non-combatant should not be treated as an enemy. Non-combatant means the one who is not on the field. Maybe he belongs to the tribe, maybe he's standing somewhere close by, but he's not fighting actively. He's not on the battlefield. Only those who are actively engaged in hostilities, they should be treated like enemies. لا يستوي القاعدون من المؤمنين غير أولي الضرر والمجاهدون في سبيل الله بأموالهم وأنفسهم فضل الله المجاهدين بأموالهم وأنفسهم على القاعدين درجة وكلا وعد الله حسنا وفضل الله المجاهدين على القاعدين أجرا عظيما. Those of the believers who sit at home, except for the disabled, cannot be equal to those who fight in the way of God with their wealth and their lives. So there are two ways of fighting in the way of God. One is by contributing, giving a donation for the jihad, and also the other is to go there personally. God has exalted those who fight in the way of God with their wealth and their lives and position. God's promise is for a good reward for all, but preference is given to those who strive over those who keep sitting at home in awarding a great reward. So, sit at home means that one meaning is that when there is a jihad going on, like when we reach Surah Tawbah, you will find out that there were some people who could have joined the jihad of the Battle of Tabuk, but they did not, for whatever reason. And that is considered a great sin, and it took a long time, before they were pardoned. Another meaning here of sitting at home is that those who did not migrate when it was obligatory and when practicing the faith was not easy in the land in which they were living. So those who did not migrate at the time when the Prophet had declared the migration to be an obligation, they are lower in rank to those who took all the risks and they came to Medina. And also they are lower in rank because they knew that now the people the believers in Medina had taken the shape of a nation, and the enemies were still trying to persecute them, and therefore they had been allowed to fight a jihad. So the Muslims needed manpower in Medina, and those people who were not migrating were denying the Muslims of this power. Darajatim minhu maghfiratam wa rahmah. Stations in which is forgiveness and mercy, for God is the much forgiving, the ever merciful. So fighting, of course, means fighting a jihad in the battlefield, but it also means fighting the jihad-e-akbar, which is against your base desires and notions and sentiments. So jihada has a very wide meaning. Mujahideen also just has a very wide meaning, and not just qital, that is fighting in the battlefield with the sword. And also in times of peace, one can also strive and do a lot of good things which the Prophet has taught us. And that is also a kind of jihad. And for all these people who do not sit at home, that means who try to keep doing something good, there are stations in which is forgiveness and mercy. Maghfiratan wa rahmah. For God is the much forgiving, the ever merciful. I think we have reached our target today. Verse 9, we've done up to verse number 96. Inshallah, next time we will continue from verse number 97, Surah An-Nisa. Shall we do a little bit of a prayer to conclude the session? أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وادخلنا الجنة مع الأبرار يا عزيز يا غفار يا رب العالمين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين آمين ثم آمين. Thank you everyone for joining in, and inshallah we'll see you next time.